Coming up next on My Week, we wrap up the Mackinac Policy Conference with a look at the week's highlights, plus news out of Lansing on a deal for Detroit schools. Stay put. My Week from Mackinac Island starts right now.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta and by DTE Energy Foundation and PVS Chemicals.
Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. We are here at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island for the last day of the Detroit Regional Chamber's Mackinac Policy Conference. There has been a lot of conversation here on the island about topics that impact the entire state of Michigan. So coming up tonight, we'll take a closer look at the messages from this year's speakers about solving issues and moving Michigan forward. Also, what should we take away from this year's conference? We'll talk about where we go from here. Plus, we'll talk about politics from a Mackinac and a presidential perspective. And the Under the Radar Michigan team looks at a new place to stay that's under construction on the island. It is all coming up for you, but we do begin with a look at some of the messages and the conversations that took place here on Mackinac this week. Innovation, opportunity, solutions, and unity were the themes that dominated the conversation at this year's policy conference. Here's a look back at some of the highlights.
It's been a challenging year. Everyone knows that. And what I would say is it's good to be here at Mackinac because over the last few years, the conference focus has really been on not just talking about problems, but talking about solutions. And so that's one of the messages I really want to reinforce with people is we've had these challenges, Flint in particular, Detroit education, but we're putting solutions in place, and this is a good place to have people get more engaged, more involved, and look at Michigan's bright future.
And we're going to talk about our vision. And our question is really very simple. This is the question we start every week with. How do we rebuild Detroit into a vibrant city with a recovery that provides opportunity to everyone? That's the focal point of what we're trying to accomplish. And so what does that mean? And as we thought about it, we thought a city, our vision has 7 things. First, we got to transform the physical landscape from blight removal. That's a big part of it. Until we get rid of the blight, you can't have any vision for the city. Then we've got to develop advantages that are uniquely Detroit. We can't just copy somebody else. We got to do something that's authentic. We got to attract businesses and jobs at all skill levels so that it can be available to everybody. We need to build a culture of entrepreneurialism. You like these things, all right? We got to have housing options for everybody in the city, okay? We've got to have opportunities for our young people, and we have to build a first-class school system.
We are in our 3rd year of water that we cannot drink. In April of 2014, this started, and this April started our 3rd year where our people, our children, cannot drink the water. So it's unprecedented to be in the middle of the Great Lakes and to not have access to safe drinking water. And unlike any other disaster or natural disaster that has struck our state or our nation, this is something that we may have to deal with for decades and really generations to come. And we have yet to garner the long-term resources for our kids or for our community to heal. So the water is still a problem, and we keep talking about Flint. I keep talking about Flint because we have yet to invest in Flint so that we can recover, and not only recover, but thrive because of this incident.
When we start looking at things in an environment of abundance versus scarcity, and that's really where it all starts. I mean, wealth is created by human beings. I mean, people sort of forget that sometimes, that well, you know, it's not just there's like this pie every year that gets issued and people split it. I mean, wealth is literally created by people, and as long as we have that mentality, and we definitely have it more than we ever have in Detroit and the whole region, you know, great things just keep happening. Like you said, one thing's connected to the other, and the more connectivity we have, and the more collaboration we have, and the more sort of positive view of things, and believe that if we have failings, we can learn from them and not be afraid of it, you know, the better off we're going to be. We just have to keep creating that environment that creates great things.
So quite a lot of talk about building a better Detroit, region, and state, and that's where we begin with our My Week contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. What a week, guys.
Yeah, it's a good week.
Yeah?
Long week, as always.
As always. All right, so what were some of the highlights? I mean, we heard some of the speakers there and some of the topics that we were talking about. What were some of the highlights that stuck out for you? I'm going to start with you, Stephen.
I mean, I think Mike Duggan's speech, the mayor's speech the other day, was a real departure for him in the way that he's sort of willing to address some of the inequalities that he thinks the city is suffering in a really aggressive way. I mean, it was a substantial call out of people in Lansing, and that you don't see that often on the stage up here. The spirit tends to try to be a little more cooperative and bridge building. He took a very hard stand that said, you know what, you guys don't care about the kids in our city if you do it this way. And I thought that was a pivot point, not just in the conference, but in the whole conversation about the Detroit schools legislation.
You know what, and I guess we might as well have that conversation right now. If you bring it up, the House worked late last night, and they passed their own version that is different from the Senate bill. $150 million for the startup costs, $467 million to solve the debt. There's a lot of people who have been lobbying for that Detroit Education Commission that we've been talking about all week, and that are not thrilled with what ended up coming out of this, which is an advisory council to produce reports highlighting where schools maybe should open, and then studying a citywide transportation issue, which doesn't really have as much teeth when you say advisory council.
It's garbage. I mean, it's nothing.
Well, hang on. Let me know. Nolan, you go ahead and react to it first.
I talked to some key members of the commission this morning, very pleased with this legislation. One of them told me, look, if a year ago somebody told us we were going to get our debt wiped out, a couple $100 million or $150 million to revamp this district, an elected school board back, we'd have been doing backflips down to the ferry. And he said the commission doesn't have as much teeth as they would have liked, but in reality, if you actually study the legislation in the Senate and study what was happened in the House last night, not a whole lot of difference. Even under the Senate version, the State Reform Office would have had to approve all of the decisions, which is the case now. They seem pretty pleased with the deal, and one of them told me, in fact, one of the key members and someone who spoke up here said, we can make this work.
It's interesting because the School Reform Office, they have to develop the A through F letter grade, and that will come to them. But you always pause and say, okay, well, they're going to be developing this. When are we going to get that online? Stephen, you said this is garbage.
It is garbage. I mean, it's nothing. It is a shill and a bow to a very highly financed ideological effort by the DeVos family and other charter advocates to make sure that we keep what we have in Detroit, which is absolutely mediocre options for parents like me. I mean, it is a slap in the face of the people who live in the city and who pay as much tax as anybody else in this state and have suffered without adequate public school options. I mean, I've not seen anything. I've not seen anything like it. And if you think about it, they could barely get this passed in the House after 13 hours of holding the floor open. It doesn't represent anybody. I mean, it represents a bare majority of the House of Representatives. You have the Senate has passed a bipartisan embrace of the DEC, and the governor wants it. Why on earth should we let that minority, that highly financed minority, set policy for everybody else in the state? So if the Senate doesn't stand up to them and say no, if the governor doesn't stand up to say no, shame on them, letting this distinct minority run us into the ground.
Well, the House basically said we wouldn't have passed it last night if we didn't think that we had agreement in it in the Senate.
The governor signed off and the Senate signed off, and the people of Detroit, if you look at our poll this week, and when they were asked about a Detroit Education Commission, 49% said no, 47% yes. So let's not pretend the parents and people of Detroit are on board with this.
I think a lot of people don't understand. Your whole question was really murky, but
maybe they do.
There's no question that when you ask parents in Detroit about the options that we have, they'll tell you how bad the charter options are, that there's a sliver of daylight between what they're offering and what public schools
Well, they have the option to go back to public schools, and they don't. 53%.
But those aren't any better.
53%. I mean, the truth here is, no matter what you do, there are challenges in fixing these public schools that this legislation or any legislation couldn't fix. And you know,
true. Well,
that
but, you
lack
know,
of confidence in the ability of DPS
Well,
to
now
do
they have
something
to,
it's
now
never
they have
done,
to work
reform
with what
itself.
they have, and part of that also, which I think people need to keep reading down the list of what this all means, is going to be increased penalties for teacher sickouts, merit
there should
pay,
be.
and the school board
Yeah,
can
right. The
hire.
teachers are at fault.
Hang on. The school board can hire
Well, they are.
non-certified teachers to fill vacancies, which
Well,
I
that's
think
gonna
is
help.
something.
Non-certified teachers.
And you
Wonderful
know,
idea.
And that's, you know, this big buzzword, oh, they're non-certified teachers. Some of them may be high, all of them, or many of them, are highly qualified in their field and perfectly capable of stepping into
Which
a
is
district
not
which
being a
can't
good
hire
teacher.
enough. I spent a day at a school last week, and they, you know, 6 different classes. 5 of the 6 teachers were absolutely dismal, and the 6th was very good. They were all certified.
So-
I don't think the certification means diddly
So
squat.
when
Wait, so we're supposed to throw out
so when the- no,
certification
no,
at
hold
all?
on a
But
second.
I think
mean-
Hold on a
I
second.
think you're flexible, and
When-
anytime you need a solution, you have to have flexibility. These districts need people in the classrooms who can give these kids some particular
Stephen.
expertise.
So when the Muskegon School District hired uncertified teachers, the state fined that district because it violated the state law.
Right.
I mean, the idea that so the idea that now
So
we're
you
going to
change
pass
So
a
it's
law.
okay enough
let's-
for have it
it's
happen
okay
in
for
Detroit.
us.
Change the law
This
for the
is-
whole state.
So here's the thing, right? All this legislation says is you and the city of Detroit, this is what you deserve, and you don't deserve any better. I mean, I can't take any other message
this
away
is a
from
bigger
this.
bailout than the Grand
It's not a
Bargain.
bailout. It's not a
It's not a
bailout.
bailout. Well, it's
bigger-
paying,
It's a
paying
debt.
debt.
It's a
You're
debt
paying
that
debt.
you ran
Bigger
up.
infusion of money than
It's a debt the state ran up.
the Detroit bailout. If you said
How
you're
is that a
sitting here
bailout?
saying that, oh gosh, nobody cares about Detroit, and they just want over the last 4 years, we've had $1.5 billion of state funds flow into
If
Detroit.
they didn't pay the
Managed
debt,
by who?
right, managed by the state. If they didn't pay the debt,
Not the
they would. The
city
whole
bailout,
state would
is
have
it?
to pay what 2.5 times what that number is because it is
But
the
this
state's
is now
debt.
this is now a district
You
that
don't
starts
get
with
credit
a
for that.
It starts not only with a clean slate in terms of its debt. It's got $1,200 more per pupil to spend. They ought to be able to do a lot
All right.
with this package.
And they're going to have to take a look now at academics through the summer, and you're going to have to see how many parents and students choose to go back to DPS
So
in the fall.
here's the other thing, right? The projections in this bill for the finances of the district going forward predict a 1% reduction in the population. That's the only way the numbers work. We haven't seen only a 1% reduction in the population in the last, 20, 25 years. It's going to be higher than that. So they will start behind the 8 ball financially in September. There is no question with these numbers that they will be back in front of the state
So the
asking
answer
for
is-
more money
the answer
very
is
soon.
not trapping kids in bad schools because we need your per pupil funding.
So
and
we
that's
let them
again
go to
what
other
that's
bad
what the
schools.
Senate
So
version
let's
would
go to
have done.
other bad schools
They're not other
instead.
bad schools.
They are.
All right.
not.
No, okay. Well, we're going to continue that argument for another day because I have a feeling all summer long we're going to be talking about where this goes from here and how everything gets coordinated. But let's go to something we can all agree on. With the 2016 presidential race is a hot topic across the country.
right.
It's impossible to escape
easier.
politics here on the island. We all agree about that, right? There are several local issues that are important to the election, such as aging infrastructure, urban policy. So what role will Michigan have in the outcome? You know, presidential politics, it was a topic up here. It kind of simmered, you know, a little bit below the surface. It's not as high as I thought it was going to be, Nolan.
Well, people up here don't seem to be different than the people anywhere else. Nobody seems to be happy about their choices and not sure what they're going to do. I mean, the partisans, the highly partisans are all rah-rah, our guy's better than your guy. But, you know, for the business people up here who aren't deeply wed to either political party, there's, you know, the same sense of distress that the rest of the electorate has.
Okay, so all morning long, there was a long panel actually this morning that Devin Skillian was moderating. He did a great job at talking a lot about the Donald Trump factor and the appeal or the lack of the appeal, and couldn't get anyone really on stage who supported Donald Trump, but they're out
they
there.
did. There are a lot of people out there, obviously. You know, I talked to a lot of Republican lawmakers and strategists and things this week, and I'm asking mainstream Republicans right now. I'm fascinated by their decision-making process here, right? I mean, by their own admission, this is a guy who doesn't stand for what they stand for, and in some really garish ways. I mean, he's a racist, he's a sexist, I mean, he's doing all these really awful things. but he is the nominee for your party. So how do you figure out what you're going to do on the ballot in the voting booth? I think that's a really interesting dynamic to have to sort out. A lot of people have said they will vote for him because he is the standard bearer, but they don't want to.
It's not much different within the partisan Democrats face in terms of looking at a person who is of low character and low honesty and has all sorts of issues. I didn't find many Democrats up here bouncing around saying, gosh, we love Hillary Clinton. I mean, they're in a similar dilemma, and a lot of them can't understand how Democrats can line up behind her.
This is the narrative, the new narrative coming out of the new absurd narrative coming out of the Republican Party, that somehow there's a comparison between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Of course,
right? There's no comparison.
Well,
I mean, this is a guy who's never.
They're both at 60% negative.
This is a guy with no experience running anything in government, managing anything in government.
This is a candidate who's under an FBI
You guys both have to let each other finish sentences, all right?
This is a guy who stands up and says, let's build a wall with Mexico in a country where we go around the world telling people, tear down this wall. This is a guy who says Muslims can't come into the country because we can't trust immigration to ferret out terrorists. I mean, there is no similarity at all here. This is you call her a person of low character as compared to Donald Trump.
I'm not comparing her to Donald Trump.
All right, go ahead, Nolan. Now you get to respond.
Democrats have the same dilemma.
No,
I'm not a Trump fan.
I don't feel like I have that same dilemma.
A lousy candidate, but this is the first time I can ever remember you've had a major presidential candidate who's under FBI investigation while she's trying to campaign.
And everybody keeps saying it's nothing.
I think what's happening, though, is you're realizing that Michigan could be more in play, and a lot of people are talking about that.
The only reason it can,
the trade issue.
I don't think that's the reason. The only reason it can be in play is if you look at these candidates' negatives. They're both up around 55 to 60% on their negatives. They don't have each of them have difficulties they've got to overcome. But if you look at who's got a fanatical base, who's got at least a small core, and maybe not that small, but a core of people who are just irrational about their candidate, it's Donald Trump. And you look at what might happen in Macomb County and in northern Michigan, places the Democrats are used to winning. You can see a path in Michigan if Clinton voters stay home.
All right, before we leave politics, I want to talk really quickly about the 2018 gubernatorial election, because it already started percolating up here in Mackinac. That's when everyone is they're shaking a lot of hands and getting to know people up there. So let's look on the Democratic side real quick, Stephen, at the candidasts that are lining up. You've got Dan Kildee,
I talked to Dan Kildee, I talked to Mark Hackel, I talked to Gretchen Whitmer. Asked them each, walk me through the process of deciding. If I had to handicap it, I would say Kildee is almost certainly in. Hackel is a little less certain, and Whitmer probably will jump in as well. So I mean, those are three really different choices.
And on the Republican side, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, of course, seems to be positioning himself.
Yeah.
Bill Schuette.
Maybe
Candace Miller.
I doubt Candace running for drain commissioner. I don't think she's going to jump from job to job.
I think she really wants to do that job.
And gosh, if you listen to the rhetoric up here about from Hackel and from her about Tony Morocco, the Macomb County. I mean, I've never heard people call somebody out. I mean, they basically called him a gangster.
A crook,
and
right.
She's in, and she's determined to rid that department of its decades-old corruption and mismanagement and self-dealing. She's not in. Schuette obviously is in. He makes no secret about it. He's the only candidate on either side says I'm running. Brian Calley is looking at it, I think, as what kind of year it's going to be for Republicans. In Michigan, you've got to go back to the 50s to find a time when the party in office was succeeded itself. Yeah. It's always been a flip-flop every time the incumbent government leaves.
Except when we went from Romney to Milliken.
Well, but Milliken had finished out the term, so he technically was the incumbent. That is the exception.
Right.
But you've got to go back to Swainson and Soapy Williams. And so he's 39 years old. He's got time here, and he, may be looking at, why don't I go back into the private sector, make a little money, get in a better position to run, and then in 8 years, the Republicans are going to be looking for a candidate, and he may be better positioned. He's still a young man. I think he has pretty good perspective on this that he's got time.
All right, so as we kind of head out of Mackinac, what happens next here? What are some of the bigger issues? Obviously, we're going to be looking at schools and how everything's going to shake out if the Senate, votes on it next week. But what are some of the other things? It's going to be a hot summer for regional transit, for them trying to pass that millage. Give me a little crystal ball look coming out of Mackinac, what some of the things we take.
Well, I think that's where we transition to. This RTA will be the talk of the summer. And man, they've got to clarify this issue, and they've got to make it a lot more appealing and urgent to voters, because now you talk to people about RTA and it's hard to get their attention.
Yeah, I think what you really need to do in that case is Mark Hackel and Brooks Patterson are going to have to be convinced to really campaign for it.
And I'm not sure you're going to get that
shouldn't
at all.
that job have been
Both
done
really,
by now?
well, ideally, sure, but it's not. I mean, I talked to Hackel about it this week.
He's
and he
a big let the people decide.
He sounded really tepid about campaigning for it. I mean, he said, look, I think it's a good idea, but I think you have to sell it to folks in Macomb County. And he didn't seem to be confident that they could. I think you sell it to him first, and let him
man,
help you out.
That job should have been done from the beginning. I don't know how you sell at this point. And you look at Oakland County, you're asking them to give up a lane on Woodward Avenue, all the way through Oakland County. That might be a little tough to get people
like that,
excited about when you look at the traffic on Woodward Avenue already, and hey, you got to make room for a bike lane too, and all of a sudden it becomes a pretty congested piece of
I do think that they have their
pavement.
work cut out for them in terms of educating the public. It is going to have to be a very busy summer for them if they want to be able to get through to people and make them understand where that money is going to go and what it's going to be spent on, and why it could be good for the region. What else? What else are we looking at?
Well, I mean, I think with Detroit schools, the question, even if we get past this
You promise
argument,
you're not going to fight, right? Because I only have like 2 minutes left.
I mean, even if we get past,
we already won, so just let him
yeah,
have
right.
back.
Well, money talks.
Let's arm wrestle it out.
Getting past the fight over what the legislation should look like, you've got tremendous challenges that not just the public schools, but again the charter schools in Detroit are going to face. We need more high-quality choices for parents like me who have to navigate what is, in my opinion, the nation's worst public education landscape. And nothing in this legislation is designed to produce any of those choices at all. And so we've got to start really thinking about how do you do that, who does it, and where does the money come from to upgrade these. I mean,
but even more critical than that, Steve, is there'll be a school board election in
November,
the fall.
yeah.
And this is not a city that has good track record of electing competent, qualified school
I
boards.
bet that work is going on right now. I mean, Judge
Well,
Rose,
we
he said
know
that
it
one of
is.
those things is to
Mayor's
recruit and
working
try
on
to get
that,
some of
and
the best people to put themselves out there for that. Guys, I hate to cut you off, but that is going to do
we're
it
done.
for our part. It's good to see you. And of course, we'll see you back in Southeast Michigan. And finally tonight, a part of Mackinac's history is currently under major construction, and the guys at Under the Radar Michigan visited a hotel site on the island that is being rebuilt for the future.
Do you enjoy a heaping helping of history with your comfortable accommodations? Well, guess what? Pretty soon, right here on Mackinac Island, they're going to have a brand new, really old place where you can stay. Gee, I think I just broke the time-space continuum. Now, when it comes to doing things right, Liz Ware is the right person for the job. She owns and operates the historic and newly renovated Mission Point Resort. And there's no other place on the planet quite like it. Well, now she's ventured all the way to the other side of the island to breathe life back into another historic structure called Silver Birches Lodge. Give me a really brief sense of the history of this place.
Sure. Silver Birches was built in 1906 by a woman named Edna Troop from the Langham Hotel Company.
Huh? So it was built as a hotel?
It was. It was. It took her about 5 years and it bankrupted her in the process.
Okay.
It did.
Well, what inspired you to take on, this has got to be a labor of love.
This is
to
a
bring
labor of
back-
love.
Because this place it's iconic to the island. And so what inspired you?
I had been coming up to Mackinac and I was on a boat and saw this property from the water and thought, oh my gosh, what is that place? And got off the boat, got on my bike and rode out here. And I came in the back way and I saw the back with the barns and the view of the lake and I just was enchanted by it. I was very pleased to be here, but I was also sad about the condition of it because it was really bad. It was about ready to fall down. There were holes in the roofs, the buildings were leaning over 1.5 feet. So we purchased it in December of 2013.
Well, you call me when it's done, and I'll come help you break it in.
Okay, maybe a cigar on the front porch?
And some brandy.
Okay.
So if you want to experience some unique history during your stay on the island next year, I recommend the Silver Birches Lodge. But I also recommend waiting until this part of the construction is history. I mean, it doesn't look very comfortable right now, but then again, I can sleep anywhere. Tom Dalton reporting almost live from the Mackinac Policy Conference.
Hey, thanks to Tom and the guys from Under the Radar, Michigan. That's going to do it for our My Week Mackinac coverage. We're glad that you joined us. We hope you'll tune into My Week next Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. And meantime, you can find us on myweek.org. I'm Christy McDonald. Have a great night. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Did you know? Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago. In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.